All right, everyone. As Jen mentioned, I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Laurice Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of C-Track Training, and I've partnered with great organizations like Be Social Change to share real-life insights and work recommendations so that we can answer the question of what can make you a successful first-time manager, but also even beyond that, what makes you feel motivated and engaged on the job. So I am going to jump in. As an overview or just to set expectations, in this workshop, there's going to be a lot of content and two key areas we're going to focus on. And so if you have questions at any time, you can drop them in the chat, and then we're going to make sure that I can answer as many questions as possible at the end. All right. Okay. So outcomes. So at the end of this webinar, you will know the attributes that make you a strong leader and what behaviors you need to leave behind. You will also know how to establish processes that support safety and productivity, whether you're there or not. So first, I want to jump in immediately and let you know that you are here likely because you know that what got you here won't get you there. As Jen mentioned, many of us come to management as exceptional individual contributors, and often we rely on that to help us understand management. So I want to jump into a question to start, right? So have you accepted that you're in an entirely new position, or are you counting on the same behaviors that got you the promotion to carry you into this new role? So I just want you to think about that. What are you, in your mind, are you like, okay, I understand this is an entirely new position with a different scope, a different set of responsibilities? Or are you approaching this position from the space of, I can do what I did before, and let's see how that works out? And this is an important question because often what happens is that when we think of management, we think of the benefits. We think of the benefits associated with management more than the skills that we actually need to be a successful manager. So what does that look like, right? It looks like you know that you have more decision-making ability, you know that you'll be managing others, and you know that you'll be invited to sit in new meetings, but you don't know what new behaviors or skills will be required for you to fulfill these responsibilities. So it's very exciting when we think about, again, the benefits that come along with management, but we don't often know what it takes to fulfill, what behaviors or what knowledge we need of ourselves so that we can adequately fulfill these responsibilities. And that's what I want us to touch on a bit right now. So in order to achieve that first outcome we talked about, which is you understanding the attributes that make you a strong leader and what behaviors you need to leave behind, I'm going to guide each of you to discover your workplace script and then ultimately your leadership style. So the reason why each of you needs to know your workplace script is because this is your default. And again, when we go back to that question of, have you accepted that this is an entirely new position, or are you approaching this as I can keep doing what I've been doing and that's going to lead me to success? If you are like most managers, then you're assuming I can just keep doing what I've been doing, then that's you operating from your script. It's your default, it's your strengths, but it's also blind spots. And these are what combine to help you show up as an individual contributor. So I want you to know your script, because when you become aware of your habits, behaviors, and strengths, then we can also help connect you to your leadership style so that you can become a more effective manager. Now, what we're going to do is take a quick quiz or self-assessment, and you're going to answer one simple question with 6 options. How do you prove your value on the job? So on the next slide, well, over the next 2 slides, you're going to see 6 statements. And what I want you to do is to read each statement and then identify which one or which number most describes you. All right, and once you've identified your number, after we've gone through all 6, I want you to put that number in the chat. All right, so again, which of the following statements best describes you on the job? 1, I prove my value through being accessible and inclusive. I'm willing to put others' needs before my own. 2, I prove my value through my achievements and high standards. I guard my reputation vehemently. 3, I prove my value through my upstanding character and principles. I easily compartmentalize the personal and professional. All right, I know each of us process differently. Some of us benefit from others reading it aloud, but I also want to take a pause here so that you can read these to yourself. Now, if one stands out, what you want to do is you want to write that number down, but you don't have to feel any pressure to have a number until we've reviewed the remaining three. All right, let's keep going. 4, I prove my value through consistency and rationality. I share my recommendations only when backed by data. 5, I prove my value through my likability and agreeableness. I am careful not to offend others or cause conflict. 6, I prove my value through assertiveness and resourcefulness. I am cordial, but not close to my colleagues. So I'm going to pause right there, not only for you all to read this, but for you all to also place in the chat, now that you've seen all 6, which statement most describes how you show up on the job. All right. Okay, someone put 1. Okay, now challenge yourself. Now, I saw someone put 1 through 6. Now, it is easy to identify with many of these, or certainly more than one of these, but I would encourage us, for the purposes of strengthening our self-awareness, to hone in on 1, most 2, right? Because I have found that we can show attributes from 2, but if you can hone in on 1, excellent. If you can hone in on 2, that's great as well. But more than that, you're not going to get the most benefit from this activity. And you're not going to be able to connect your script to your leadership style. All right, so let's keep going. So if you were a 1, you are a rescuer. I always like to tell everybody, congratulations, right? Congratulations, because awareness is a consciousness now, right? You don't have to go around calling yourself a rescuer, but it is going to help to have a language for some of the behaviors that you default to. So if you are a 1, you're a rescuer. If you are a 2, you're a know-it-all. If you're a 3, you're a role model. 4, numbers person. 5, people pleaser. 6, lone wolf. Now, I don't want anyone to feel like they should judge themselves based on the name, because I promise underneath it, we're more focused on the behaviors than the actual title. So remember, knowing your script is important because your script is your default. These are things you easily do, and these are actually things that helped you as an individual contributor. So let's get into each one. Now, for my number 1s, which there are a few of you here. Excellent. All right, so there's a little bit of everyone covered, so this is great. So this will also give you context, because I'm sure each of you, everybody who has ever become a manager has also been managed. So what you can do for scripts that aren't yours is see if you've ever had a manager that's like this. Now, for my number 1s, you are a rescuer. Now, what that means is that as an individual contributor, your identity, and our identity is our self-concept, right? How we value ourselves, is rooted in nurturing others and gaining recognition for the sacrifices you make for the team. You have a heightened sensitivity to others' discomfort and a desire to be accessible to your colleagues during their times of need. Now, what you want to do is remember, every time as a manager, we've evolved or we've advanced. So even though your script is a rescuer, what you want to do is take the best of your script, meaning the best, your strengths, and become a mentor. So as a mentor, which is your leadership style, you skillfully advise others to solve their own problems, and you encourage them to persist in difficult moments. Now, the question for each of us, especially as we transition into management, is, well, how do I know if I'm operating from my script or my leadership style? And here's what I want you all to keep in mind. When you're operating as, so your strengths for both, your strengths, if you are a rescuer, but also a mentor, is that you are reliable, empathetic, and patient. Now, your blind spots for both being a rescuer and mentor is if you're a blind lowest, but specifically if you're operating in your script, right, is you can be blindly loyal, you can be overly excusing, and you can be stagnant, right? Overly excusing meaning your empathy means that you don't center, for example, whatever you don't stay rooted in whatever the behavior is that you don't want people to do, but you say, oh, that's okay. That's okay, right? You allow your empathy continuously to override the standard. And stagnant. Now, a great question you can ask yourself if you are someone who picked number one to know if you're operating as a rescuer or a mentor is, am I being a sounding board or a crutch? Because if you're a mentor and you're operating from an evolved space, then you're being a sounding board, but you're trusting other people. You're offering advice, but you're trusting other people to solve their own problems. If you're being a rescuer, then you're being a crutch, and you're spending your time and energy and effort solving their problems and not giving them space to do that themselves. Now, again, if you have any questions as we go through these 6 leadership styles, then I want you to add them in the chat because I'm happy to talk more about them afterwards. All right, so my number 2 is my know-it-alls. Now, if you are a know-it-all, as an individual contributor, your identity or self-concept is rooted in your performance and others' recognition of your knowledge. You go above and beyond. You judge others for falling short of your standards, and you protect your reputation by any means necessary. And what's important to remember if you're a know-it-all is that you truly value your competence, right? And also recognizing how your competence contributes to results. So I know sometimes with this one, we're like, oh, who wants to be a know-it-all? But the core of the know-it-all is that you rely on being able to get the outcome that you want. You're really results driven. Now, your leadership style is a motivator. When you evolve, right, or especially as you step into management and advance, what you want to lean into is creating environments where high expectations are celebrated and improvements are viewed as opportunities for greater accomplishments. Now, remember, we, especially when we're on a journey, it's easy for us to fall back. So the questions or things you want to keep in mind so that you can pay attention to if you're doing your script as a know-it-all, or if you're operating in your leadership style, is 1, to know your strengths, which are you are confident in your intelligence, you have a high standard of excellence, and you are results focused. These are things you shouldn't shy away from. You also want to be aware of your blind spots, and these will stick out to you specifically, especially when you're operating in your style. Be conscious of being arrogant, stringent and overly demanding, and anxious. And remember, the anxiousness comes from your desire for results, but the arrogance often comes from when I meet people who are managed by know-it-alls. The arrogance can come off when people try to share ideas with you, right? Because often know-it-alls have had to do so much as individual contributors that when they get to management, they bring that competency and those steps to their team, right? So they really want their team to follow in the things that they know are best practices. But this can come off arrogant if you don't leave space for your team to also share things with you. So ask yourself, am I focusing on showing others that I know the best way? If you're doing that, you're operating in your default script as a know-it-all. Or am I allowing others to show me another way, right? Am I motivating them to a higher standard and also allowing them to share ideas that can keep the bar high? Again, I'm welcome to talk about this more. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat now, or you can hold them till the end. Now, 3, if you're 3, you are a role model. Now, your script as a role model means that your identity is rooted in your good manners and others' recognition of your integrity. You're respectful and well-mannered. You have a desire to meet others' expectations, and you adhere to a strong code of ethics. So what's awesome about being a role model is you are someone who you can clearly compartmentalize how you should operate at work, meaning you're fine with separating the personal and professional, but you're also highly disciplined around your interactions because of your ethics, right? You want to be above board at all times. Now, your leadership style is a spokesperson. So as a leader, you're a fair-minded communicator that welcomes personal connection with the team. Now, I want to emphasize personal connection because one of the key differences between operating as a role model, which is the script or a default in this space, versus a spokesperson, is that role models, right, while we are polite, structured, and principled, Our blind spot is that we can be robotic, self-preserving, and fixed. So as role models, we have a deep need to, again, compartmentalize the personal and professional. So we show up at work and we do our best, but we have been taught or we have been trained to not bring our full selves to work. So we are hesitant to be self-disclosing, or if you're a role model, you're hesitant to be self-disclosing. So I want you to ask yourself, am I being passive in this situation because I don't have an informed opinion, right? Or because I'm not comfortable sharing my opposing opinion. So if you're a role model, you've been trained in how to not to rock the boat. You probably let some things pass more than most people. And also what people should know is you're comfortable with conflict, but you believe that there's a way to approach conflict, right? So you're someone who, again, if people disagree, that's fine, but you want to make sure that there's a process, a respectful process in the way people disagree. But again, you're not always the most self-disclosing about how you, about your position. So this question about if you're being passive because you don't have an informed opinion, right? That is you being more of a spokesperson and waiting to hear from others. But if you're not comfortable sharing your opposing opinion, that is you defaulting to being the role model who feels like they have to be robotic and polite, even when they do have a clear perspective. All right, let's keep going. So 4. So you want to evolve from 4, your script is a numbers person, and your evolution as you become a manager is to go from a numbers person to a visionary. Now, if your script is a numbers person, as an individual contributor, your identity is rooted in your good manners and others' recognition of your integrity. Oh, no, sorry, this is a recap, but if you are a numbers person, your identity is rooted in your recommendations and others' recognition of your intellect, excuse me. So what's numbers people, their go-to behaviors are that they rely on recommendations that are backed by data, they are informed, and they are focused. So your leadership style, and again, when this is sent out or when this is, I'll make sure to add a note so that this is corrected. But your leadership style when you're evolving from a numbers person is a visionary. So as a leader, you're a skilled teacher who introduces others to possibilities or previously uncovered tools, practices, and possibilities. So what's great about being a numbers person is that, remember, your identity or self-concept is deeply rooted in your intellect. So for you, you really pride yourself on being informed, right? Staying most up to date on what the best practices and the evidence are. You're practical, and you also can be commanding. You have a conviction when you know what you know. Now, your blind spot can be that you can come off condescending, coldly calculating, and controlling. So an anecdote about people who are numbers people is they can be overly rational. Now, this is important to remember because people are complex. People don't always do the same thing all the time, right? We have patterns, but that doesn't mean we always operate from those patterns or behaviors. When you are a numbers person, you like a certain amount of predictability, so you can make informed choices based on the evidence. So what's important for you to ask yourself, especially as you evolve into management, is, am I emphasizing the facts to invalidate others' concerns, or am I emphasizing the facts so that others see a path to addressing their concerns? So pay attention to when you're using the evidence as a way to invalidate or tell other people, you know what, you shouldn't be feeling that way because the evidence shows this, or when you're emphasizing the facts so that people can use both their intuition and their logic to make more informed decisions. All right, 5. So if you're number 5, which I saw there were a few people with those, then you are a people pleaser. And again, I want to take a pause here because the main reason that I'm focusing on scripts and leadership styles is because I found that the number one problem with first-time managers or managers in general, because they don't receive training, is that you're just doing what you know works. And for each of you, your script has worked. It has gotten you the relationships that you have. It has gotten you the results that you've gotten. And it's not to say that these things didn't serve you. It's just to say, as a manager, remember, you're not in a supersized version of your old role, right? You're not an individual contributor now at a higher level. You truly are transitioning into being a manager of a team where you have to build relationships with your team and how you build relationships has to change. So I hope that's what you're seeing in your script. A key part of understanding your script is knowing how you build relationships. So for number 5, your script is a people pleaser. Now this is probably one we've all heard before, right? People will even say I'm a people pleaser, but let's get into the root of what we mean by this. So as an individual contributor, your identity is rooted in your association and others' recognition of your benevolence. So you prove your value by anticipating and meeting others' needs. What does this look like? You're quick to say yes because saying no could lead to others' disapproval. You often withhold your true feelings and preferences because you don't want to be off-putting. Now, your leadership style is a diplomat, meaning that when you evolve or the way you want to shift your relationships is that you want to go from being withholding from being mediating, right? It's for people pleasers, you overvalue other people's perceptions, ideas, and you devalue your own. So you want to balance them, right? You want to bring both together, and to do that is to be a mediator. So you have this natural ability when you consider other people's perspective and your own to find the solutions that honor the needs of all involved. Now, here's how you'll know if you're being a people pleaser, which is your script, or if you're tending towards being a diplomat, which is more of the leadership style and more of how you want to operate as a manager. Now, your strengths is that you are welcoming, receptive, and supportive. It's easy for people to share with you. Now, what you want to be aware of is when you can be fawning, again, putting others on a pedestal, being indecisive because you're not centered in your own perspective, and when you're being self-sacrificing, right? It's easy when we're people pleasers to be overgiving because we put so much value in others. So the question you want to ask yourself on this journey as a manager is, are you making this choice, or are you making a choice to avoid the guilt you feel when disappointing others? Or am I making this choice because I don't want to feel guilty about disappointing myself? Now, the anecdote I'll share about people pleasers is that what you have to bring to the forefront is that you take so much information from other people that, again, you're often not sure, or you can feel unsure about what it is that you value. So you want to ask yourself up front when you make a choice, you want to ask yourself up front when you're making a choice, what is driving this choice? Is it me focused on myself and centering my own opinion as well as others? Or is it me simply centering others' opinions? And finally, did we have any 6s? I think we had a few 6s. Then your script, if you're number 6, is a lone wolf. Now, if you're a lone wolf, then as an individual contributor, your identity is rooted in your assertiveness and others' recognition of your grit. So you're energetic and easily misunderstood because you make moves without explaining the motivation behind your actions. You have a deep need for autonomy and a deep-rooted determination to get the job done. Now, your script is a lone wolf, but your leadership style is a reformer. So as a leader, you're an influencer who can guide others beyond outdated approaches and invent creative solutions in the face of challenges. Now, often with lone wolves, sometimes lone wolves and rescuers operate together, which is interesting, but often as lone wolves, what you want to pay attention to is you have a deep need for autonomy, which is excellent because it allows you to pioneer. Again, your strengths are you're focused and you're resourceful, meaning you're the one that's quick to say, listen, I can get it done myself, right? Or I will do it myself, or let me try this myself. That's a great strength of yours that you want to lean into, because as managers, we do want to lead by example. But what you want to be aware of as a lone wolf is when you're being rebellious, when you're going against the grain just to go against it, forceful or scattered. By scattered, what I mean by this is lone wolves, if you default to or if you lean too hard into your autonomy, you will realize that as a manager, you can no longer do everything. Even if you could as an individual contributor, meaning if you were able to run through your to-do list every day as an individual contributor, that will be increasingly difficult to do when you're managing a team. So it's going to make you feel scattered. So again, what you want to ask yourself so that you differentiate between your script and your blind spot, or your script and your leadership style is, am I going at this alone because I want to remain in control of how others perceive me? Or am I going at this alone because it's a chance to show others new possibilities, right? Sometimes, again, as a lone wolf, the benefit of being autonomous and focused is that you can lead by example and show others the way. You're comfortable with challenges and overcoming them. But sometimes as a lone wolf, you just want to remain control of the process, and you don't want feedback on your process, right? You're used to doing it alone. You move quicker that way, and you don't necessarily want to hear from others if they have a way that could be beneficial, but could also slow you down. So I want to take a pause here as we reflect on this very important first part, because the question I want to ask you all that will help you get to that outcome of knowing your strengths and also what to leave behind is based on your script, and you can share this in the chat. What's one behavior or way of operating that you have to transform so that you can step into your leadership style? And so a great example of this, I'll just go through each one quickly as I look at some of the numbers in the chat. So what I found with rescuers is it's easy for your team to celebrate you and to trust you because they know you will be there for them. But what I've also found is that because you have a discomfort with others' failure, then what happens is you have to, it's almost like you got to sit on your hands. So if you're a rescuer, right, and I've been guilty of this as well, you have to sit on your hands when other people have challenges because your instinct is not to teach them how to navigate the discomfort of that challenge or learn from that challenge. Your instinct is, I can help you, right? It's a nurturing to the point of diminishing what your team can do. So that's something you can reflect on, right? Where are you preventing others? Now, two, if you are know-it-all, what I found is that you have a great pride in your ability to achieve results. And it's likely that you've been in a lot of different positions and gathered a lot of information. This is great. But one of the things you may want to reflect on is when building a team, is the entirety of the dynamic one way? Meaning, are all the ideas always coming from you? Are all the recommendations only coming from you? Or are you creating a space where you're using your intellect and experience to hold people to, okay, try this idea, but also let's make sure that when we implement this idea, this is how you can implement it at a higher level. So again, people tend to call know-it-alls the great negators, because what happens is as soon as you hear an idea, you'll say, but have you tried this? So instead of saying, but have you tried this, you could also say, that sounds like this is great. Once you've tried this, let's come back and share it with me. And let's also talk about ways how we can strengthen this idea. So focus on strengthening, not just saying, okay, this is better immediately. So again, that's something you could reflect on. 3, if you are a role model, what's exciting about being a role model is every role model I've ever worked with or coached is exceptional when it comes to their ethics. You all will hold a strong standard regardless of who you're speaking with. What's important about a role model today is that your team wants to know you, right? Your team wants to know you. As we live in an era of work where people used to be like, there's the personal and the professional. But in today's era of work, you want people who know you, or you want people to feel comfortable that they're getting the real you, I should say, right? So as a role model, you don't have to you have to be an open book. That would be insincere of you. But I would challenge you to think about where you are limiting your self-expression. Do you want to crack a joke? Do you want to tell something about your background that's relevant to the information you're sharing? Do you want to give a little more about yourself within a context that you're comfortable with and that's appropriate to what you're speaking to, right? That's what I found with role models. Just how can you build your confidence by sharing more about yourself? And you'd be surprised how this builds a relationship with your team that's rooted in more sincerity than just rigidity. Exactly. Authenticity. Oh, let me go back because I have a couple more before we move to the second part. If you are a numbers person, what's exceptional about you is that you focus on the evidence and the data. What's tough about you in your building of relationships is that people feel like when they come to you with anything that they don't have data for, you dismiss them. And so what I've seen with numbers people is that there's a disconnect between them and their team, because their team feels like every time they make a recommendation, they have to prove with them, they have to quantify what the impact, right? And some things, and we'll talk about this especially in part 2, some things about people are intangible, right? They're not quantified, yet they still have an impact on how the team shows up. So you want to pay attention to making sure that you value the evidence as much as you value being empathetic towards things that don't have a ready solution, right? Some things are not immediately solvable, and you want to pay attention to where you're pushing a solution where one hasn't become clear yet, simply because you have the data. All right. Oh, I keep clicking this. Okay. So 2 more. Okay. If you are a people pleaser, again, well, people pleasers don't like conflict, right? This is where people pleasers are nuanced, but different from role models. Role models do not mind conflict. They just expect people to engage in it in a specific way. If you are a people pleaser, maybe you're reflecting on the fact that you don't know, you can't hold the line, right? Or you're uncomfortable giving consequences because you do recognize people are going through someone may be in a difficult scenario, right? So you want to pay attention to how to be even with everyone, because your empathy will allow you to hear the story and for that story to override the standard. You also want to recognize that when people in your team are in conflict, then that conflict may have nothing to do with you, and you can allow them to have conflict. And then finally, if you are a lone wolf, lone wolves pay attention to when you flip the script at the last minute. Flip the script meaning lone wolves can sit in a group and establish a plan, and then at the last minute, they can go against the plan because they feel like the plan will slow them down. So really pay attention to that impulse of, I'm going to go at it alone. I'm going to go at it alone. Because often that means that you're going to lose the trust of your group because the group is counting on you to do what you said you're going to do. So if you change something at the last minute, keep your group in the loop. Don't just pop it up on them. All right. Which one we actually are. If this is a great question for it, I'm going to answer this quickly. And then the other questions I'm going to answer at the end. Yes. So Verena, we'll talk about this a little bit, but 1 in 6, which is a rescuer and a lone wolf, I've actually seen them very closely connected. So it's possible to be both. And what I would say a question you want to ask yourself is the reason why you rescue others because you know what it's like to be left out alone? It's very interesting. I think you're battling that impulse to, like, you're most comfortable doing things alone, but you also know how difficult that can be. And so anyone I find who has these two together, there's a deep need to save other people from the experiences that they've had to endure by doing things by themselves and feeling unsupported. And again, we can talk about this more at the end. All right, so let's roll into part 2. And again, you'll notice the most significant part, or one of the largest part of the webinar, and I'm going to start to wrap up in the next 10 minutes, is around understanding yourself and your specific leadership style. This is also important for anyone who is following or succeeding another leader or manager who's previously been in that position, because then in those positions, what we tend to do is just do what's been done before us, and we don't even get a chance to think about what actually is best for us. We just feel like we have to do what's been done. All right, now, we talked about yourself, which is critical to being a first-time manager, understanding your leadership style and your strengths. We also want to talk about what it takes to form a strong team that can operate without you. So culture takes form through interpersonal norms. So I want you to ask yourself, do you have parameters that guide how your team members work together? Or are you relying on the come see me at any time, open door policy, message me at any time, right? Because many of us work remotely, to keep your team productive and on schedule. So I want you to reflect on that, especially as we move into this next part, where we talk about creating a culture on your team that is productive with or without you being there. Now, managers, first-time managers often say, listen, I'm available at any time. We create this endless open door policy, which we mean well. Our intentions are to create a relationship with the team where the team recognizes that we are there to support them. But the implementation of I'm there for you at any time means that we actually can't get our own work done. So this is something I want you all to pay attention to, and something that norms will help you address. Now, it's easy to take quality teamwork for granted, right? When we work in team, tasks are divided, timelines are established, feedback is shared, deliverables are completed. Boom, boom, boom. But what happens when work doesn't get done? Now, the reason why we're focused on people management skills, and SHRM did that research study that found that most people wish their managers had better interpersonal skills, is because I'm sure you all have been in a scenario where people know what to do, but it still doesn't get done. And when you think about why work doesn't get done, it's the unseen behaviors where that you all haven't set norms around, right? People need to ask questions, they need to share ideas, and they need to express concerns. Now, I want to talk to you all a little bit more about how establishing norms in these areas is going to help you create a culture of productivity, but also a culture of a collaborative team. So if you've heard of the term psychological safety, underneath that term, right, is that people need to feel safe to ask questions, share concerns, and express ideas. People need to know that there will not be consequences being retaliation, consequences being no promotion, consequences being disliked if they express themselves openly. And so part of productivity and part of teamwork has to be the ability to give your team norms or the opportunity to express themselves openly. And the main ways people want to express themselves are through asking questions, sharing concerns, and expressing ideas. So I want to talk to you all a bit about how to create processes around that. So now team members need to ask questions. This can seem like a duh, because remember, we take teamwork, good teamwork for granted, but I do want to take a moment to explain why asking questions is important. Asking questions leads to a better understanding of an idea. It addresses areas of confusion, and it clarifies information necessary for problem solving. Now, when you think about norms, and norms are processes, right? Norms are what is an established process. I want you to know there is no one way for a team to ask questions. So here's some ideas, right? Maybe your team sends you an email with a clear title, question, and when they need a response by, right? This is the way they ask you questions. Or maybe instead of the open door policy where people can come in or message you at any time, you can say, hey, I have daily office hours. So if you have a question, just feel free to drop in or message me then. I'll be able to get right back to you immediately. Or if you have established one-on-ones with each of your team members, maybe you ask them to share their questions until then, so that it's not just the question with a little bit of information behind it, but you all can discuss it more in depth. What's important to remember about norms is that people have questions and you want to answer these questions, right? Because in order, you want to clarify for people, you want them to have the information they need to get the job done. And we want to be able to do this effectively as managers, right? When questions are answered, there's clarity, people can move forward. But really, norms are about thinking about you have to get your work done and the team has to do their work as well. So what's the most productive way for you to encourage your team members to ask you questions? And also, what's not said here, but what we will focus on more in the course, is how can you encourage your team's members to ask questions of each other, right? They can also be resources to each other. All right, let's keep going with the second norm, or the second piece of psychological safety, which is that your team members need to share ideas. Why? Because this invites others to share diverse and different perspectives that otherwise wouldn't be considered. Sharing ideas introduces new information that can strengthen a solution or process. And sharing ideas encourages creativity, right? Specifically creative brainstorming, meaning, and creativity is anything that differs from ways that are conventional ways that have already been tried, right? It's anything that offers a different route. Now, when you think about people's need to share ideas, there's a couple of things that you can do. One, you can ask your team member to share an action plan, right? Or a verbal pitch or action timeline that outlines not just the idea, but how it'll get done. You can also consider a pilot, right? Maybe when someone has an idea, your norm on your team is, listen, let's not stop at the idea. I want you to test the idea and share the results with me. Show it was successful, and then we can talk about what the next step is so you can keep going. Maybe you want your team members, before they share an idea with you, to have a gut check with a colleague, right? So maybe they first share their idea with someone else on the team who can help them see, this is where I could see this idea works, and this is a blind spot. Now, sharing ideas, again, is important for all the reasons we talked about, right? It certainly strengthens solutions, and it gives us new approaches to old problems. But the thing you want to think about when people share ideas is a recognition that, remember, this is about your team remaining productive and you remaining productive. Every idea doesn't get the green light. So in encouraging your team members to share ideas, how do you also encourage them to think through the idea so it's easier for you to give them the green light? And some of those ways, again, are listed here. So you want them to of course, have ideas. You welcome their ideas, but the norm is really around when should they bring the idea to you. All right, and last norm is expressing concerns. Now, I'm sure many of us have experienced this, not only because of some of the concerns we had as we transitioned to remote work during the pandemic, but concerns and having concerns is a common part of, or I would say it's not a common, but expected part that comes with any job, right? A concern is just a grievance or an area that needs further discussion. Think of it like that. Now, expressing concerns is beneficial because it helps translate emotions into words that others can connect to. So we can feel something, but when we express it as a concern, then we can give it language, and then other people can also support us in connecting to that, or again, giving us more context around that. Expressing concerns is also important for psychological safety because it provides colleagues an opportunity to share and seek support, right? Really, when we keep grievances or concerns to ourselves, it only heightens it for us, right? Everywhere we go, we can see how this concern is inhibiting us or limiting us from feeling fully present and engaged. So we want to allow concerns because it also allows us to feel like we can be supported on our team. The other thing that happens, and I'm not sure if this has ever happened to any of you, is that sometimes when you express a concern, maybe to your manager, they'll say, well, no one else has said that. You're the only person this is an issue to. When in fact, it's just that you're the only person that felt comfortable expressing the issue or concern. So you want to surface grievances that break through a narrative that everything is okay, right? We don't want to create an environment where people feel like they have to pretend to go along to get along. We want to acknowledge the reality that sometimes things come up that merit further discussion. But again, the purpose of setting norms as a first-time manager is to recognize how do we want our team members to do this, especially with you and again, among each other. Now, again, all of these are just possibilities. You have to pick the one that is best for you based on your leadership style, but also based on the processes that are already established within your organization. So, okay, so what we want to discuss. So options are a weekly standing meeting. My team can share concerns to me and the team so that we are clear and consistent on the problem. Now, what I've found, especially when doing this with organizations, is they like the weekly standing meeting because people want transparency in how the problem is shared and approached. So they don't want to create or foster an environment where people say one thing to someone about what the problem is, then they get in front of another person and express a different problem. One-on-one, it's recognizing that some concerns are best shared privately, maybe because they're confidential or they're just close to someone. So maybe your norm is that team members can share their concerns during that check-in with you. You also invite them to share some possible solutions that they've thought of during the conversation. And finally, maybe your process is that people can share anonymously. And again, this is helpful on teams I've found that want to prevent retaliation or that recognize there can be personalization when people openly share concerns, especially if they're associated with the impact of someone else's behaviors. Another thing associated with this is maybe it's a concern that many people have, and so you want to address it from that approach as well. Now, what's important in establishing this norm especially is remember, you're thinking about norms for yourself, but also norms for the team. And so one of the things you want to consider is that, well, when people have concerns, sometimes they have insights into solutions that you don't have. Now, sometimes there are things you can see, especially because you understand the organization better than your direct reports. It's likely, again, you have more experience there. You're in more of a position of decision-making ability. So there are things you can see coming that they may not have access to. But what's helpful in any norm you create around expressing concerns is that the team members recognize you're looking for solutions as well. Now, what I want you to reflect on, and this is critical, right? Because again, part one was you focusing on your leadership style and how you build relationships and how not to default to blind spots. But the second piece you want to reflect on is, again, how you support people adhering to norms. So here's some questions I want you to reflect on. What would you do if everyone follows the norms except one person? So maybe you set a norm around the way you want people to ask questions is that they can share them during the one-on-ones or they come through office hours. What do you do if one person repeatedly doesn't do those norms, right? And then maybe if you're back at work, I remember one One client said that no matter what, at any time, even when his door was closed, people repeatedly came into his office. So what do you do if individuals don't follow the norms? And also, what language are you comfortable using? Because everyone uses different language to remind people of the norms. This is important because norms are only as good as accountability that we can keep people accountable for. So I want to take these final minutes just to do a wrap up, but also, as Jen mentioned, to invite you all further to know that if you enjoyed what you learned today, that there is an opportunity to work with people or to work with me further in Be Social Change's First Time Manager course, where you can gain the skills and knowledge you need to overcome these common managerial challenges and more, and where you can also foster community among other social impact leaders, many of whom are here today, and where you can increase your sense of confidence. Sometimes when we have to begin again in a new position, we don't feel that competence or that energy that we felt when, especially that got us to this, to our position. So one of the things we'll focus on is definitely giving you a renewed sense of confidence in yourself and your abilities. Now, over this 3-week course, which starts October 12th, we're gonna go deeper into some of the things we talked about today. So again, many of you have identified your leadership style. We're gonna take it a step further and give you a deep dive into even more explicit behaviors that you need to address as you become a manager. Session 2, we're going to go further into you establishing team norms, but also in establishing the norms that work for your team. So we're really going to pay attention to process. We don't want you to be the bottleneck. We don't want you to be the manager where nothing gets done if you're not there, meaning you can't go on vacation, you can't take an out of office meeting, or you can't be away from your computer. And if you do any of those things, then the work stops. We want to prevent that. And finally, we didn't talk about this today, but as a manager, you have to have difficult conversations, which include feedback, addressing pushback, and tough calls. And so I want to give you all a framework to do that. So again, you feel confident and less anxious. The Jen, again, can put the registration link in the chat. It starts next Wednesday, October 12th. The investment is $479. Be Social Change does offer payment plans, and feel free to talk to Jen about that. But again, I want to remind you that as a first-time manager, you are in an entirely new position. And so the purpose of this course is to help you address some of those obstacles in quicker time, right? So that you don't have to learn through trial and error. So a deeper dive into your leadership style and the explicit behaviors you need to leave behind. You want to continue or delve deeper into how to set norms within your department and organization overall. Remember, norms are processes put into place, and we want to practice or also talk about how to keep people accountable for those processes. And also, we want to have difficult conversations with ease. We have all been on the other end of feedback that we thought was unfounded or that we felt like didn't give us a space to express our perspective on it. This is what we will do in the course, is talk about how to have even-keeled, tough conversations where you feel less anxious, but because you have given space for your team members to communicate and also to co-create solutions with them. So what I'm going to do now is take some of those questions that you have. I saw a few in the chat. I'm also going to stop sharing. Again, my name is Laurice Brown. You can learn more about my work at ctracktraining.com. And again, I know we have 5 minutes left, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as possible and stay on for a little bit. I'm looking at some of the questions. Okay. Manager, when someone on the team is having difficulty completing tasks because of an at-home situation. Going through. Yes. So this is a great question because people, I mean, there's a lot that we bring our whole selves to work and we have experiences. Yes. So what's important as a first-time manager is to think through that there are certain things that distract us or allow us, again, like trauma, where we're not present at work. And again, I'm going to a question that someone had. You do want to give people space. So first of all, you want to check with your organizations. Sometimes organizations have operating procedures around leaves or bereavement or mental health and wellness. So first, you want to check in on that as a first-time manager. You want to highlight that you want to bring attention to your organization's policy. The second thing you want to do if your organization doesn't have a policy is often organizations will say, well, talk to your manager. You want to take a moment to assess with the person honestly. And again, this is where sharing grievances come up. you want to hear how this situation, this trauma, this experience, whether it's divorce or other things, is impacting their ability to do their work. And sometimes the ability to step back, or I know most times the ability to step back without the pressure of feeling like they have to run back immediately is important. So as a manager, what I would say is, again, assess the impact on themselves, but also on their work. See how much space you can give them according to your manager's policy, but also according to your own discretion. So absolutely, as a first-time manager, and if this is happening at your organization and you don't have a policy, this is a chance for you to be a champion of something that's increasingly important and necessary to professionals overall. So I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but again, start with the organization policy, but also know you do have discretion as a manager to give them that time, to give them that time. Absolutely. Now, the other balance there, and I love the other part of the question. So the other balance there that I do want to add is, this is why we talk about norms and the creation of policy. What I found as first-time managers is what makes us reactive is that we haven't thought about a standard operating procedure, a norm, what to do in this situation. And so then when people come to us with something, we react in the moment instead of taking a step back. So I would say what you want to do is, once you've established a norm around, maybe it's a wellness day or a wellness week that you give people, then you want to bring that to the team and let them know that if they need beyond that, then you'd likely have to escalate it to someone else. And that might be a different process. So acknowledge their mental health and, again, work within the norms or the established parameters you're given. All right. Are there any other questions? Am I missing anything? And thank you to all. Again, the intention for this is absolutely to be helpful and to help you identify some of those challenges you face as a first-time manager.
Thank you so much for leading this great content. You've been getting a lot of love in the chat of people just sharing how meaningful this is. So thank you so much. And thank you to each one of you for coming out today. It's really great to be a part of this conversation and to know that there are so many people out there who are interested in creating better experiences for their teams, for their organizations, and doing good work even better. So thank you to each and every one of you. I hope you have a great rest of the fall, and feel free to reach out. You'll get the recording and perhaps the PowerPoint slides. I'll touch base with Larice about that.
Yeah.
Great. And the PowerPoint slides in an email from us this week. And we look forward to seeing you at a future Be Social Change event. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.